Hi my little baguettes, welcome to l'Académie Équilibre, and today we're dealing with exceptions in French. Now this is one of those CBSE traps that we need to be really cautious of because this is the place that people lose marks, which is why memorizing this will be a cherry on top for your board exam. Now, why do we need to know these exceptions? What are the exceptions that we're talking about? First, we need to understand what a French gender rule is so that we can move on to the exception to this rule. Now, what we've learned is that if a noun ends with E, it is considered feminine. For example, a girl, that is une fille. A table, une table. The eraser, that is la gomme. We already know everything in French has a gender, be it a table, be it an eraser, be it a sharpener, a pen, a phone. Everything in French has a gender, which is why gender rules exist to know which thing is feminine, which thing is masculine. Now, French has established the first rule that if a noun, like a girl, a table, an eraser, a box, right, if it ends with E, it is feminine. That is your first rule. Now, second rule is that if something ends with S, it is considered pluriel, that is plural. For example, if I make the same thing, la gomme, that is your eraser, and I make it plural, that is gomme, with an S, it becomes plural. So we say les gommes, that is the erasers. Or if I say the pens, that is stylo, it becomes les stylos. Now S is considered to be plural. Another thing is that if something ends from X, then also it is considered pluriel. For example, the animals, les animaux, it ends with X. The cakes, for example, les gâteaux. Now, what about masculine? That is male nouns. So, if anything that does not end from E, S, or X is there, it is considered masculine. So, anything that does not end with E, S, or X is masculine. For example, stylo. There is a pen. So, it is un stylo or le stylo. A pen, the pen. A boy, for example, it will be un garçon. So anything that is not ending from E, S, or X will be masculine. That is your general French gender rules. Now, if a noun does not follow this rule, we call it an exception. And we have to memorize these exceptions. Why? Because CBSE might give this in one of the questions and you might get confused that, oh, this ends with E, so it has to be feminine, or that it ends with S, so it has to be pluriel. Now, this is the case 90% of the time, this is what happens. But then there are a few nouns that do not follow this rule and they work in their own way, and we need to memorize it. And this is important for every board student because you're going to be attempting things like adjective démonstratif, right? That is CE, CETE, right? CET, CES, right? For that, you need to know what the gender of the noun is. You're also going to be attempting adjective possessive, that is moma, me, tonta, te, right? And then article défini, that is le, la, les. And then article indéfini, that is une, un, des. And if we go into more advanced topics like pronopossessive, pronodemonstrative, which you have to attempt in the exam, and CBSE might, provide you one of these nouns that are an exception, and you may not be aware that, oh, this was an exception, and you do it wrong, which is where you lose half a mark or 1 mark. Now, the exceptions that I'm going to be telling you about, obviously, there are a lot of exceptions, right? But we're going to be focusing on the exceptions that occur quite frequently in books like Entre Jeunes and the CBSE previous year papers. So I have picked those out and we're going to be discussing them once, what they mean, what if they follow a pattern, and how do I memorize it. We'll start with masculine. So the first exception that you have, I'll tell you a pattern. There are words that end with able. Words that end with able are generally considered to be masculine. For example, portable. Let's start with a device that is portable, which is a phone. So it is un portable or le portable, even though it ends with E, it is masculine. I'm saying able because there are more words that end with able, which is why you'll be able to memorize them together. You can cluster them together and memorize. But what matters is that it ends with E. But still it is masculine. Second one is cartable, which is your bag. Another one is coupable, that is a guilty person. So, le coupable. These are the most commonly occurring ones for able. Then you have words that end with age, that are masculine. Again, ends with E, but the pattern is age, ends with age. So you must have heard of this word everywhere, that is fromage, which means cheese. So France has more than 300 types of cheese, that is 300 types de fromage. That is, now again, this ends with age. Another word here is age, that is someone's age, right? We ask quel âge as-tu, what age are you? So it is someone's age. Then another important word, visage, that is a face, right? Un visage, le visage, mon visage. If I'm talking about your face, so it will be ton visage, ton visage. Another one is mensonge, that means a lie. For example, this is a lie, you're telling a lie. So, un mensonge or le mensonge and not une, even though it ends with E. Then there are a few more exceptions that don't exactly follow pattern, which is why you need to memorize them separately. But they're again very important, very frequently occurring in the CBSE papers or also in your book, your practice books, which is why I would advise you note it down somewhere and memorize it. The first one is homme, that is a man, right? So that is masculine, ends with E, but it is un homme or cet homme. Now next one, livre, that is a book. So un livre, le livre, even though it ends with E. Now thé, which is your T. Again, masculine with an accent aigu on your E. Then you have café, which is your coffee. So both tea and coffee are masculine. Then the word beurre. So we're discussing food items now, right? Tea, coffee, butter, beurre. So far we've discussed 4 food items: fromage, thé, café and beurre. Next, if we're talking about so many food items, why not make a meal out of it? What is meal in French? Repas. Un repas. Now this one ends with S. This is the first S ending word in the entire list, which means most people will consider it plural, but it's an exception and it means a meal. Now then, let's do more words that end with S but are masculine. Another one is printemps, which is your spring. So, au printemps, that is in spring. Then there's the word temps, which means time or weather, depends on the context. But what you need to know is that is it's le temps. Next one, another S ending word is cours, that is class or a lecture. So le cours. Then we'll come to another pattern, that is air ending words. That is, these words end with air, but they are masculine. So first one and the most frequently occurring one that CBS likes to give is dictionnaire, which is your dictionary. So it is un dictionnaire or le dictionnaire. Then another one is vocabulaire, that is your vocabulary. So the entire vocabulary that you learn is masculine. Another one is anniversaire, that is your birthday. So l'anniversaire or un anniversaire will be your answer. A few more CBSE favorites are, you've got problème, that is, it is le problème. All the problems are masculine. Then another one is arbre, that is your tree. So it is un arbre. And this is your problem. So le problème. Then monde, that is the world. So we say le monde. And another thing that you've heard quite frequently, must have heard, is we say tout le monde. that is everyone or the entire world, so we call it everyone. So tout le monde est là, that is everyone is here. And monde is your world, which ends with e, but if you'll see we put le before it, that means again masculine. Then the word article is also masculine, which means the same as it is the article. Then service, that is your service, again same meaning. Then you have musée, which is your museum. This one has two e's but still very masculine. So we say le musée, un musée, and not la musée or une musée, so it is masculine again. Then a few more we have is supermarché, that is your supermarket, again ends with e but masculine. And final one, which is quite easy, which is frère, which means brother. A brother is obviously masculine, so we take it as masculine even though it ends with an e. Now this was your important nouns that end with e or s but are considered masculine, which means they don't follow this French gender rule. That means they're an exception. Now it is your job to memorize them because chances are that one or two exceptions might be in the paper, and statistically the probability is pretty high for these ones. I've given you a pattern which might make it easier for you to memorize, so you can remember able ending words, aj ending words, or air ending words, and then there are some food items, and then there are a few exceptions that don't really have a pattern, but if you read them a few times and you learn the meaning, it will be easier for you to memorize. So these are your masculine exceptions.